She used to hum when she packed. Just this light, almost tuneless little melody that drifted out of the closet while she folded her clothes into careful rolls. It was one of those background details of marriage I'd learned to love, her unconscious tells. But somewhere in the past few months, the humming stopped. That, and her bags started coming together faster. Too fast. The night it really lodged in my gut, we were at a company holiday party. The wine was mediocre, the speeches worse. But laughter floated from the corner where she stood talking to a small circle from her department. Her hand rested lightly on her boss's forearm as he chuckled at something she said. Greg Alden, mid-40s, all smooth confidence and button-down charisma. I'd met him twice. Never liked him. Didn't dislike him either. He was beige. But suddenly he was everywhere. Afterward, one of her coworkers, a guy named Darren from payroll, made an offhand joke as we passed the dessert table. Something dumb said with a chuckle and a wink. She and Greg must be married to the job, though maybe to each other too, right? I laughed, too loud, too fake, and the moment passed. But the sentence stuck like grease on a plate that doesn't quite come clean. A week later, she was packing for a conference in Denver. 3 nights. All expenses paid. She said it like she always had, breezily, too casually, like it was an errand. But there was something in the way she said. Greg's handling most of the presentations. Like it was rehearsed. Like she was pre-defending something. I nodded. Didn't press. And I didn't stop her when she left a small red envelope on the counter labeled for emergencies. She'd been doing that lately. Almost like she wanted to prove she cared. Or like she was trying to soften something in advance. That Sunday night, while she was still gone, I opened our credit card dashboard to check on a recurring charge. We had one of those linked accounts, something she suggested years ago to make travel easier. I didn't go looking for anything. I really didn't. But my eye caught a charge that didn't fit. Hyatt Regency. 2 guests. Saturday night. Denver. The charge hit me in the chest. Not like an explosion, more like a slow pressure, as if gravity had quietly increased and no one else noticed. She told me she'd been in meetings all weekend. Said she ordered room service, FaceTimed me from the hotel bed with a book in her lap. There was no second wine glass in the shot. No shadow of someone else. But there was a line in her voice, something too smooth, too careful. I stared at the charge until the screen blurred. Then I copied the transaction, pasted it into a document, and saved it under a new folder. Travel Receipts, 2025. I didn't ask her about it when she got back. I didn't accuse rage or dig through her bag. When she kissed me hello and started talking about how draining the panels were, I just listened and smiled like always. I'd been married to her for 9 years. Long enough to recognize when something fades from a person's voice. And long enough to know not to announce that you've noticed. I went to bed that night and lay awake, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me. Her breathing was steady. Mine wasn't. My gut had already made its decision. My mind just needed to catch up. I didn't plan revenge. Not then. I just started preparing. The next morning, I made coffee like nothing had shifted. She came downstairs in a navy blouse and silver hoops, her Monday face, I used to call it. She smiled. Kissed my cheek. Told me not to wait up because Greg's booked back-to-back with me all day. I watched her drive off before I turned back inside and opened my laptop. We shared an old Gmail account from years ago, set up back when we were planning our wedding. We'd forgotten about it mostly. It had become a dumping ground for old newsletter sign-ups and digital receipts. But it was still linked to her travel aggregator app. She hadn't logged me out. The itinerary showed every trip from the past 6 months, including Denver. I clicked into it. 2 flight confirmations. 2 seats side by side. Both under her company's name. I searched the email archives using one keyword. Greg. Pages came up. Meeting invites. One-on-one prep sessions. Dinner reservations forwarded from OpenTable. And then, a note forwarded from her phone, marked, Follow-up client dinner. It read simply, "Dinner was amazing. Like last time." No name, no signature. Just a timestamp and an email tag showing it had been forwarded by her to her own work email. I opened a blank document and started dropping everything in. Dates, locations, subject lines. I printed each email, hole-punched them, and placed them in a thin black binder I bought that afternoon. That night, we ate chicken marsala. She told me a story about someone in her department who got a standing ovation for a presentation. She laughed. I laughed too, because I had to. But my eyes studied the curve of her mouth as it moved. I couldn't unsee the performance in it. I remembered our 3rd anniversary. Napa. She'd surprised me with a vineyard tour and a handwritten card that said, "Forever isn't long enough with you." I believed her then. I remembered the way she held my hand under the table, thumb brushing mine like she never wanted to let go. Now she gripped her wine glass differently. Too loosely. Like something she was pretending to enjoy, but barely tasted. Over the next 2 weeks, I found more. I got access to her corporate travel calendar through her laptop when she forgot to log out. It was all there, flights that didn't match what she told me, hotel names that reappeared, overlapping blocks with Greg's initials penciled in. She'd left a small portable printer in the hall closet for work-from-home days. I used it at night, printing entries one by one. It took time, method, and patience. She'd always told me I was the most grounded man she knew. It was time to prove her right. Every dinner we shared after that felt like theater. Her lines were memorized. Her cues perfect. She reached for my hand twice during those weeks, and both times I let her take it. Not out of affection. Out of necessity. I needed her calm. I needed her confident. And most of all, I needed her unaware. I wasn't gathering proof for a confrontation. I was building a case for an exit. An exit on my terms. Because some betrayals you can't undo. But you can decide how the curtain falls. And I wanted it to fall hard. It wasn't just dinners and emails anymore. It was infrastructure. Her work calendar began syncing more often with mine by accident. Something about a shared Zoom link integration we'd once connected for a brief collaborative project. She'd forgotten to unsync. I didn't remind her. Every Thursday, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., a block labeled Strategy Session GA appeared. Friday lunches were tagged Offsite Development. Mondays had check-ins that lasted until 7 p.m. I called her company's front desk one afternoon, posing as a vendor with a delivery. I asked what time she was expected back in office from the offsite. The receptionist, cheerful and oblivious, told me she wasn't scheduled out that day. Hadn't been all week. So I dug deeper. A Dropbox folder she'd shared with me years ago, used mostly for home renovation receipts, hadn't been touched in a while. But she hadn't removed access. One folder, buried under mislabeled PDFs, held 8 JPGs. Client dinners, supposedly. Except in one photo, taken at some high-end rooftop restaurant I recognized from a Yelp ad, she was leaning in toward Greg like someone caught in a private moment. Her hand rested just below the table, close to his in a way that didn't look accidental, just barely visible under the white cloth. His smile was the kind men wear when they know they're winning something they shouldn't have. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. I felt cold. Not the kind from betrayal, colder. The kind that comes with clarity. With detachment. I enlarged the photo and noticed the wine bottle in the foreground, Chateau Margaux. Retail, over $400. I cross-checked the expense logs from our credit card. Nothing matched. But she'd recently filed for a corporate card upgrade. She'd left the form in our scanner tray, half covered by an old grocery receipt. I used the application number to trace through the employee portal. She'd saved her login credentials on her laptop browser. The expenses were there. Dozens of them. Spas, meals, hotel upgrades, all marked as client relations. One was for a dual wellness session at a lodge just outside of Austin, during a conference I knew had ended 2 days earlier. Company funds. Fraudulent logs. Lies wrapped in paperwork and strategic positioning. Then it hit me like a slow wave I hadn't seen coming. I'd been passed over for a promotion 6 months ago, one I was told came down to fit and internal alignment. Greg chaired that review panel. I remembered the wording from the rejection email like a scar. A strong candidate, but we've chosen someone who better supports our leadership's current direction. Leadership. Greg. That was when the betrayal stopped being about us. It became something else. She hadn't just broken our marriage. She'd manipulated a power structure to elevate herself at my expense. She hadn't just chosen someone else, she'd strategically helped bury me. I stood in our home office staring out at the backyard. The same yard where we once strung up lights for a summer dinner with friends, grilled steaks, and slow danced barefoot on the grass. I thought that kind of life was solid, built to last. Now it felt like a stage set. One kick from behind and the whole thing would fall over. I went back to the printer, added the Dropbox photos to the binder, labeled each by location and date, and slipped them between the calendar logs and the email threads. The next phase wasn't confrontation. It was exposure. And I'd make sure when it hit, it wouldn't just collapse her story. It would drag Greg down with her. Greg's wife's name was Claire. I found it mentioned once in a company newsletter. She donated to a charity raffle last spring. A few clicks led me to her LinkedIn. Then to her photography blog. Then her Facebook. She wasn't overly private. Polished, tasteful posts about nature hikes and weekend baking. She seemed real. Grounded. The kind of woman who still signed her holiday cards with actual pens. When the firm announced a volunteer cleanup weekend tied to our department's annual outreach initiative, I signed up immediately. I made sure my name was next to hers on the list. I met Claire hauling mulch bags at a lakeside park. She wore a faded CSU sweatshirt, her hair tied back, and she laughed easily. Genuine. No angles in her. I played my part carefully, polite, light jokes, a few well-timed observations about the craziness of corporate travel schedules. I never said her name. Never said his. Over the next few events we talked more. About books. About how politics had made Thanksgiving awkward lately. About how much she missed how simple things used to feel. She never mentioned Greg. I didn't ask. But by the third weekend, when we were sorting donation bins together, she said it quietly, like testing a theory. Do you ever wonder if the people we trust the most are just better at pretending? I didn't answer. I just looked at her, nodded once, and passed her a clipboard. That was enough. Back home, I'd booked a 2-night romantic getaway package at a luxury resort near Lake Arrowhead, the same resort where my wife and I had celebrated our 3rd anniversary. The same place she told me was the best 2 days of our lives. I made the reservation in her name. 2 guests. Champagne on arrival. Room upgrade included. Then I printed the confirmation, sealed it in an envelope, and addressed it in careful block letters. Mrs. Claire Alden. Personal, confidential. No return address. Just the printed confirmation. No note. No explanation. I dropped it at a local post office 2 towns over. Then I deleted the reservation email. Burned the envelope printout. Clean. Precise. That weekend I didn't go far. I drove to the old lake trail behind the resort and hiked alone. It was quiet. Cold. I stood at the edge of the overlook where we'd once taken selfies, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. This time, I just stood in silence. The lake hadn't changed. The sky hadn't either. Only the silence meant something new now. It wasn't the emptiness of loss. It was the stillness of resolve. She wouldn't see it coming. Neither would Greg. And when it landed, it wouldn't just be emotional. It would be strategic. Final. Clean. She came home late Sunday evening. Not unusual. Her text said she'd had a long drive back from the airport. That part, at least, was true. Just not from the airport, she claimed. I heard her key in the lock at 7:42 p.m. Her steps were slower than usual. Deliberate. When she walked through the door, her face was pale, drawn tight across her cheekbones like she hadn't slept. She looked at me from the hallway and said only, "Can we talk?" Her voice was a whisper. I didn't speak. I just nodded once and gestured toward the dining room. The table was set, no food, just 2 chairs, and a single folder resting dead center. She hesitated. Then walked over, sat, and reached for the folder with trembling hands. Inside, page by page, was the case I had built. A printout of the Hyatt reservation. Flight confirmations for 2. Calendar entries cross-referenced with Greg's itinerary. Expense reports showing romantic dinners charged to the company. Photos from the Dropbox folder. The printed message. Dinner was amazing. Like last time. And finally, the resort confirmation for Lake Arrowhead, booked in her name. She didn't open every page. She didn't have to. When she looked up, her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. No words came. Just the kind of shallow breathing, like someone trying to keep themselves from unraveling. "I can explain," she finally said, barely audible. "It wasn't what it looks like. Things got out of hand." I didn't flinch. Didn't let her finish. I'd rehearsed my response a dozen times, but when the moment came, I didn't need the script. "You've had your conversations," I said, voice level. "Now it's my turn to end one." I reached into my briefcase and placed the second folder beside the first. This one was thicker. Divorce papers. Already filed. Copies for her review. With my lawyer's contact details clipped to the top. She didn't touch them. Her hand stayed in her lap, fingers laced tightly, white at the knuckles. Her eyes darted between the 2 folders like she was waiting for one to vanish. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. I believed her, but not in the way she meant. She hadn't meant to hurt me, because that would require caring. This wasn't malice. It was calculation. She just assumed I wouldn't see. She stood up slowly, as if unsure her legs would hold. "We can fix this. I'll quit the job. I'll cut contact with him. You already cut everything that mattered," I said. "This isn't a decision I made in anger. This is math. Evidence. You built a second life. I'm just clearing the debris from the first." She tried one more time, voice sharper now, like maybe anger could override guilt. "You're going to throw away 9 years over this? Over a mistake?" I stood then, calmly, and collected both folders. Tucked them under my arm. Looked her in the eye. "No," I said. "You did." And I walked out of the room. She didn't follow. I didn't hear her cry. I didn't hear her scream. I just heard the slow creak of the dining room chair as she sat back down, alone, surrounded by the proof of her own undoing. The confrontation wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was precise. Controlled. Devastating. The way endings should be. By Wednesday, the ripple had reached the firm. I hadn't needed to make a call. I hadn't leaked anything. I simply forwarded a copy of the expense documents, highlighted, with a polite note to the compliance office. "For your review. Concerned these might have bypassed internal policy." No name. No accusation. Just facts. By Friday, Greg was gone. The firm released a terse internal memo citing personal reasons and organizational misalignment. Nobody believed it. You could see it in the sudden silence in the hallway conversations, in the way people glanced at each other when his name came up, and then quickly changed the subject. She wasn't far behind. Put on leave. Pending review of protocol breaches. The firm had to act. Too much liability not to. It wasn't just about infidelity now. It was about misuse of funds, conflict of interest, and leadership misconduct. HR had its hands full. Friends stopped calling. One couple we used to double date with, Ben and Olivia, sent a polite, awkward message about giving you both space. Translation, we picked a side. It wasn't yours. Claire didn't message me. She didn't have to. I heard through a quiet channel that she'd already filed for divorce. Publicly. She was the one who leaked the screenshots, the photos, the expense trail. Her message was clear: you humiliated me. I'll return the favor. I received 3 messages from my wife the following week. The first: please, don't let this ruin both of us. The second: this doesn't have to end like this. We can manage the fallout together. The third: you've made your point. I get it. Just stop now. I forwarded all 3 to my attorney. Then I deleted them. There was nothing left to salvage. The moment I walked out of the dining room that night, I'd crossed a line. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. There was no going back to who we were, or who she pretended to be. I moved into a furnished apartment 2 blocks from my office. It was sterile. Quiet. But it was mine. No echoes of shared dinners or staged laughter. Just space. Blank space. The kind you can start to rebuild from. I met with my lawyer every Thursday. We mapped out everything: assets, equity, pension allocations. I protected what mattered and let go of what didn't. She tried to reach out again, through mutual friends this time. Subtle things. A bottle of my favorite whiskey dropped at the front desk of my building. An envelope of photos left in my mailbox. A note in handwriting I knew too well. We were real once. I didn't open the photos. I didn't need to. We were real. And then she wasn't. Truth is, the fallout didn't make me feel triumphant. It made me feel hollow. Not from regret, but from exhaustion. 9 years unraveled not in a blaze, but in a quiet, methodical fire I had set myself. But I didn't burn out of vengeance. I burned out of necessity. Because sometimes you don't escape betrayal by confronting the person. You escape it by making it impossible for them to deny what they've done. And then you leave them to live with it. 2 weeks after the dust seemed to settle, I got the call. A woman from corporate compliance, Midwestern accent, polite but clinical. She wanted to confirm a few timelines and details. Her tone made it clear she already knew the answers. She just needed my affirmation on record. I gave her what she needed. Then she said the words that twisted the knife deeper than I'd expected. We've confirmed your ex-wife's involvement in unauthorized expense approvals, including co-signatures routed through Greg Alden's department. It wasn't just unreported personal use, it was systemic misrepresentation. Systemic. That was the word she used. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was coordinated misconduct. They traced a pattern over 18 months. Internal dinners logged as client entertainment, weekend getaways buried in line items for regional training, spa treatments classified under employee wellness incentives. The approvals matched Greg's login. But in several cases, especially the most egregious ones, it was her name submitted on approvals that bypassed policy, using a secondary authorization channel left open on an old platform. There was no room for doubt. They'd built their affair on a foundation of lies and fraud, and eventually, the cracks gave way. The firm acted fast. A formal letter arrived at her attorney's office. Termination for cause. No severance. Benefits frozen pending legal inquiry. Her reputation, carefully cultivated, polished, curated, collapsed overnight. Word spread fast in industry circles. HR databases flagged her name. Greg's too. Neither of them would be quietly transitioning to another role. Not after the screenshots circulated. Not after Claire filed her public divorce suit, citing both misconduct in the relationship and financial impropriety. It was filed in a jurisdiction with transparent court records. Within 48 hours, the court documents hit a local online legal watch site. Then the screenshots leaked. Not from me. I never needed to play that hand. Someone else had access now. Claire, most likely. Her pain had become public, and she made sure theirs did too. Her name trended locally on Twitter for 36 hours. A few comments. A couple of Reddit threads titled, "Local execs caught in expense scandal affair." Nothing that would last forever. But long enough to leave a permanent smear on Google. I watched from a distance. No glee. No pride. Just the quiet recognition that everything she'd built on deception had finally turned on her. I remembered a moment from 4 years ago. She'd gotten an award at the firm's annual retreat, some innovative leadership recognition. She came home beaming, tipsy from champagne, holding the plaque like a trophy from another life. She'd whispered that night, lying beside me, "I feel like everything's finally coming together." I believed her. Because back then, I still thought we were the same team. Now, her plaque probably sat in a donation bin, forgotten under the weight of what followed. I forwarded the audit findings to my lawyer. We were finalizing the divorce by then, every document buttoned up, every asset squared. She'd tried to negotiate. She even offered to keep things civil if I retracted the expense report forwarding. My response had been brief, factual, unmoved. There was nothing left to discuss. I moved again, this time to a smaller home, one with no shared memories, no ghosted corners. Just blank walls, clean lines, a place to breathe. I started going on long walks. Alone. No music. No distractions. Just the sound of shoes on pavement and the wind through new trees. I began cooking again, just for me. Nothing fancy. Just real food. Real things. I wasn't healed. Not yet. That would take longer. But for the first time in months, I could feel the floor beneath me again. Stable. Solid. Not waiting for a lie to collapse it.